Hey writers, I have another peek and critique for you today, this time looking at rhyming picture book stuff. Hi, I'm Dactylic with the Lyrical Language Lab, the place for children's writers who want to learn all they need to know about rhyme, meter, and lyrical language. I'm back today with another peek and critique session with a rhyming picture book sample. If you would like to submit a piece for me to look at, you may do so at the link down in the description. And be sure to stay tuned until the end for today's writing prompt. So let's get started with this piece sent in by Madeline. Remember that these are all very small snippets of larger pieces, so I'm only seeing a tiny portion of the whole, and I am giving quick feedback on what I have in front of me. So let me give it a read. Gail had a mom with a marvelous nose. Kids pointed and laughed like you would suppose. Look, said Sly Sally, that's just how it goes. We won't accept your mom's marvelous nose. Gail was unhappy. She said, Sly, her nose can stir up spaghetti and add tomatoes. She can tickle your armpits and twinkle your toes. Both she can do with her marvelous nose. No, said Sly Sally and struck up a pose. Kids just don't like your mom's marvelous nose. Sly, Gail then said, you are vicious and cruel. Mom's marvelous nose can drive me to school. Later, Gail's mom said, it's just they're the norm. But naughty small whispers will talk up a storm. Next day in the park, tongues wagged to and fro, and right at that moment, winds started to blow. Well, this sounds like it's gearing up to be a pretty fun story. The first thing I like to do when I'm working with a rhyming manuscript is analyze the meter to see what we have here. So I can then tell if it's consistent throughout. This sounded pretty good with a couple of little glitches here and there. So let's just scan the first stanza and see what we have. Gail had a mom with a marvelous nose. Kids pointed and laughed like you would suppose. Little variation there. Look, said Sly Sally, that's just how it goes. We won't accept your mom's marvelous nose. Since there is some variation, I go on and do the second stanza as well, just to be sure I'm positive what the base meter is. So I'm going to go a little bit more here. Gail was unhappy. She said Sly her nose can stir up spaghetti and add tomato. I'm leaving this one blank right there. I'm going to come back to that. She can tickle your armpits and twinkle your toes. Both she can do with her marvelous nose. Okay, pretty consistent. So it looks like we're dealing with a base meter of dactylic tetrameter. A dactyl is a stressed beat followed by two unstressed beats. Tetrameter means there are 4 feet, 4 of these dactyls in one line. Gail had a mom with a marvelous nose. Kids pointed and laughed like you would suppose. Look, said Sly Sally, that's just how it goes. We won't accept your mom's marvelous nose. So, as you can see, there are 4 beats in each line, and that is pretty consistent all the way through. So I want to go through and point out a couple of the glitches that I found. As you can see here, there's variation. This one starts with an unstressed beat. That variation is perfectly acceptable in dactylic meter, in any meter. Adding an unstressed beat here and there or taking one away is acceptable. It's not something you want to go overboard with. Madeline has a pretty consistent rhythm going on here, so she can get away with this. So, but there are 2 variations in this line. We have kids pointed and laughed. You see that? Between laughed and like, we are missing an unstressed beat. That is called a caesura, and that is also okay. It's a small variation, and it usually happens, well, a caesura happens in the middle of a line where there's a little pause or a missed unstressed beat. So I'm leaving that. I think that's fine. Just wanted to point that out to you. Let's look at our next line. This is very consistent. Look, said Sly Sally, that's just how it goes. Good. Now, I have an issue with this 4th line. It needs to be read as we won't accept your mom's marvelous nose. But I want to stress won't. in this line. We won't accept your mom's marvelous nose. And I did that several times before I started recording this. And every single time I stressed the won't, even though my brain said, no, Renee, you have to stress the we, because that's what Madeline wants me to stress. And that's what the meter wants me to stress. But I want to stress the won't. We won't accept your mom's marvelous nose because it's just natural for me not to stress we in a sentence. Because if I stress the we, then it begins to feel like we as opposed to whom. We won't accept it, but he will. Do you see what I mean? So to make this work, I feel like I need to put in a beat between we and won't. And that would mean that this line now starts with an unstressed beat instead of a stressed beat. Again, that's okay. So for example, let's put in the word just. Look, said Sly Sally, that's just how it goes. We just won't accept your mom's marvelous nose. Now I have no problem reading that. Now, I would not put in just because we already have just up here. So one of those has got to go. But I just wanted to illustrate how adding that little something there makes me read the line more easily, even if it also means not starting on a stressed beat. Again, minor variation, and it's okay. Now let's look at the first line of the second stanza. I read this without a problem because I knew it was coming. Gail was unhappy, she said, Sly her nose. And I was able to read it that way because Madeline did set up a pretty consistent rhythm for me to give me a running start into that line. But if I really look at it and get nitpicky about it, I would want to probably stress the name Sly. So I would naturally read this. Gail was unhappy. She said, Sly her nose. And that would mess up the meter a little bit. So you might want to jiggle this line around a little bit until it falls into place to take that stress, the wanted stress, my desired stress, off of the Sly. Now we get to the second line where I left the last foot open over here because there is an error that does need to be revised. And it has less to do with meter and more to do with rhyme. And the problem here is the word tomatoes. My mantra for rhyme and meter is don't mess with the stress. That means we cannot put a stress in a word where it does not naturally belong. And in this case, in order to make the rhyme, because a rhyme happens on a stressed beat only, in order to get to the rhyme between nose and tomatoes, I would have to stress toes. But we don't say tomatoes, it's tomatoes. And nothing we could ever desire in the world will ever change that. So that is messing with the stress. So this absolutely has to be revised. And I leave that to Madeline to take care of. But I did want to point that out and explain why that has to happen. All right, now there was one tiny thing I'm going to nitpick again over here. And this is, she can tickle your armpits and twinkle your toes. Very nice. Both she can do with her marvelous nose. Now, as you can see, there's another variation here so that this line is really anapestic. Again, that's okay, depending on how you fix the tomato problem. But this can happen. I'm going to say to leave it. But both she can do with her marvelous nose. I feel like you put the both there so that you could have that stressed beat in the beginning, but it's a bit of an inversion. And an inversion, again, is when we play with the construction of a sentence so that we can get to our meter, but it's not terribly natural. Because normally we would say, she can do both with her marvelous nose. And that would actually work. Because if we move it, she can do both, we still have a stressed beat here, right? She can do both with her marvelous nose, and it's more natural. So, easy fix, already done, Madeline. Yay! Now, let's go to the third stanza and see what's happening there. We have, no, said Sly Sally, and struck up a pose. Kids just don't like your mom's marvelous nose. Sounds great, right? Nitpick. Struck up a pose. Is this just here for the rhyme? I'm wondering. Is this forced? why she's striking up a pose. Now I'm getting a little bit into content, but it all works together, right? Rhyme, meter, content. It all has to be this one big happy marriage of stuff happening. And this one I would just wonder about. And finally, we've got stanza number 4. And I've got an issue with this first line in a couple of different respects. Later, Gail's mom said, it's just they're the norm. Okay. The meter itself, I feel, is a little bit forced here. Later, Gail's, again, there's a name. I always want to stress a name. Later, Gail's mom said, it's just they're the norm. You know, when I'm never quite sure of if my meter is working or not, I get the meter out of my head and I just say it like a normal sentence and see how it sounds. Later, Gail's mom said, it's just they're the norm. So the second part feels very metrical and good. The first part is throwing me a little bit. So you might want to look at this first half as far as meter goes. The second part, I have an issue with this one because I don't know grammatically if this is correct. The construction is a little bit off. It's just they're the norm. Who's the norm? What's the norm? I think she is saying to her daughter, don't worry about it. People talk, I don't care. But it's not really coming through. And again, I think this might be a case of pushing the rhyme, forcing the rhyme because you need a rhyme with storm. So I think that little pair might need some revision. And then in the second line, we have a little bit of construction weirdness happening. But naughty small whispers will talk up a storm. The meter is fine, but small whispers don't talk. They are the talk. It's the kids who are talking. So that would need to be fixed as well. Then, next day in the park, tongues wag to and fro, we have a caesura. Pretty consistent again? Okay. And right at that moment, wind started to blow. So, last 2 lines are fine. So as you can see, although I have deemed the base meter to be dactylic, there are a lot of anapestic substitutions in here, and that works fine, as long as Madeline is just as consistent throughout with this balance of dactyl with anapestic variations. Now, just a couple of comments on the content, a couple of things that came to mind as I was reading this. We have right off the bat this Sly, who apparently is the spokesperson for all the other kids who don't like Gail's mom's nose. The thing that sticks out for me with that is this the first time they're seeing the nose? It feels like if she's been at this school or wherever she is in this neighborhood all of her life, that by now they've gotten over the nose, right? So my first question is, why are they now talking so much about the nose? Why is it suddenly an issue? I mean, I don't know. Is it a new school, or is it they've just moved, so it's a brand new neighborhood where they've just had their first nose encounters? See what I did there? Another thing that jumped out at me was in the third stanza with this cruel school thing. Sly Gale then said, you are vicious and cruel. Mom's marvelous nose can drive me to school. So I feel like to call somebody vicious and cruel is pretty serious. And then instead of following up with that, she just goes on to name another thing that her mom can do. I feel like that needs to be followed with some other action by Gail, some other comment, or a reaction from Sly Sally. Something that has nothing to do with what else mom can do with her nose. What mom can do with her nose maybe should all come before that, you know? And then when we get to the vicious and cruel, now we're starting to see where Gail is really getting bothered by this. So I have a feeling that the school line is also in there to make a rhyme and not because it best serves a story at that point. And again, that's always a danger with rhyming picture books. They are incredibly difficult to write because we are always in danger of letting the rhyme lead the story. When we just simply can't do that, we need to let the story come out in a logical progression. I feel like we went backwards on that line instead of moving forward. It's like, ooh, vicious and cruel. Sally's going to be mad about that, isn't she? But in fact, nothing happened. We just got another thing that mom can do. So again, let that stuff come before, or, you know, maybe a little bit more later, but right now I need something to move that story forward. So I feel like there's a really big jump from the vicious and cruel and then nothing happening. And then this white space here, I just want something to happen. And also maybe a little bit more, I need to know that Gail is really down about this. If her mother's comforting her, I'm not seeing the emotional progression yet in this section. So I think there's more to add there. And then I think you've got a really good opportunity here for lots of drama. Oh, I also wanted to mention your rhyme scheme. So let's take a look. We have knows, suppose, goes, knows. A. You're rhyming on all the same word. Nose, tomatoes, which we need to change. Toes and toes would not be a good rhyme either, right? And nose again. Then we've got pose, nose, cruel school. And now we've changed to AABB, so we've become couplets. And then we have norm, storm, fro, blow, couplets again. So I think you also need to look at this rhyme scheme and make it more consistent and get yourself out of the nose cage. Trust me, I've written a manuscript with a very difficult rhyme scheme. I used all the rhymes. And now if anyone needs me to revise, I've painted myself into a corner because I've already used all those rhymes. There are none left. So go for the couplets. Go for the couplets and see what you can do to revise those lines in the first two stanzas so that they're not all the same rhyme. And also, by doing that, you have set up an expectation here in the beginning that everything's going to rhyme on the O's rhyme, and then it doesn't happen. So just don't even give us that expectation. Do yourself a favor, trust me. Okay, now I really am done, Madeline, and again, thanks so much for sending it in. And now let's get to our writing prompt. For the prompt today, I'm going to ask you to do exactly what I just told Madeline not to do, and that is to write a poem in which every single line rhymes. That's called a monorhyme. And for an example, I have a silly poem that I wrote a few years ago called Ambush. Beneath the cotton-checkered skies, the hilltop blazed with fiery cries. Friends, you know we must arise if we're to win the battle prize. Open up your compound eyes. We're better than those gnats and flies. Gather up your war supplies. Bifurcate those tunnels, guys. A sneak attack. Send in the spies. Let's fight as one. Let's colonize. The soldiers seized the apple pies. They marched off with the chicken thighs. The hilltop rang with hungry cries. The rest is history, ant size. Okay, so obviously the biggest tip I can give you if you're going to write a monorhyme is to look for a word with a whole lot of rhymes. So do some brainstorming and then go to rhymezone.com or your favorite rhyming dictionary and just make a list and start putting it together. Have fun with this one. I hope you found this critique helpful today. If you did, please do share it with your writer friends and help spread the word. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do that and then hit the little notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.